Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 375, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, May 26th, 2025. Hey everyone, I hope you had an amazing weekend. Maybe you enjoyed some of the Spoleto Festival events, or Piccolo Spoleto as well. Both are underway right now. Still plenty of time to check out any number of cultural events. There's concerts, there are theater productions, dance productions, and on and on. Obviously art, there's exhibits. There's so many things going on between the two festivals. If you don't know the difference, Spoleto's the big one. Sometimes tickets can be a little pricey to some of the events, not all of them. And Piccolo Spoleto is kind of like a spin-off event that is mostly, supposed to be either free or a little bit more, a little bit on the cheaper side as far as pricing. Obviously, productions are still good or whatever you're attending, but just to be a little bit more affordable for folks. So whatever your budget is, there's something for you to do, and I hope you're out there enjoying it. All right. Outside of that, not much going on here, so I'm not going to delay you any longer. Let's get into the latest news. There is a genetic testing company that is working on proving whether or not shrimp at some Lowcountry restaurants is actually local or from imported waters. This is something that gets talked about a lot in Charleston. I'm sure other coastal communities as well. Whether it's, shrimp or what other seafood, depending on the region you're in too, certain areas are more known for, or their waters have more types of different, whether it's fish or lobster, crab, on and on and on. That's a conversation of, hey, we want to support the local restaurant, of course, but we hope in turn that local restaurant is supporting our local fishers, shrimpers, the guys out there getting our oysters, whoever it may be. We want to make sure that the restaurants are supporting them. So in turn, we're all supporting local. Now, of course, that's not always going to be the case. It's not always easy. There's all sorts of factors that go into it. Certain times of the year it might be more difficult to get locally sourced seafood, especially in, certain regions of the country. Cost is always an issue, and on and on and on. But by and large, most people want to know that what they are eating is coming from, someone local and coming from local waters. And it's always interesting because I always wonder, like, well, a restaurant could just lie. Who's really going to know besides maybe some of the employees who are familiar where things come from? And unless they're going to rat out their employer, you know, no one's really going to know. Well, this is one way to see who is serving local shrimp. And, on one hand, if they're not promoting that it's local, I mean, obviously they're not doing any deceiving of any kind. But it'll be interesting to see if any of these places that say, oh, yeah, local shrimp all the time are lying. So I'm interested to see where all this goes. So this testing company, I believe it's pronounced SIAD. They stylize it with the capital S at the beginning, lowercase e and a, and then an uppercase D. So I think it's SIAD. I have no idea, but SIAD Consulting is the name of the company. Their founder and CEO, her name is Erin Williams, and she comes from a family of shrimpers. So obviously, this is something that's important to her. So what the company is doing, they're taking samples of shrimp from a random selection of 44 Lowcountry seafood restaurants to see, hey, are these local or are they being imported from somewhere else? Williams went on to say that the restaurants are mainly from the Charleston area and the surrounding beaches. So these are going to be places that we are all very familiar with. Very interested to see what happens here. You can visit the link in the show notes to get details about how the testing works and some other information. But basically, they do this rapid test, and it takes about 2 hours to show results. So they've already gotten back some results. They haven't, produced those results yet. But they say that they will be released around June 10th. So just a couple of weeks from here. So very interested to see, what the percentages are like. How many are serving local? How many are not? Of the ones that are not, did they promote it as being local? Could be really interesting. And it's the first time I've heard of something like this happening anywhere, let alone here. I'm sure it's not the first time, but I was really enjoyed seeing that headline, and I'm certainly looking forward to see, hey, what is going on here? Who is telling the truth? Who isn't promoting that they're local? And it's a good thing because they're getting it from off, so we'll find out in a few weeks what these handful of restaurants that were used for this sample, what's going on. We got an update about the Boeing case. Obviously, this is big in the Charleston area as Boeing has I don't know if headquarters is the right word, but they have a facility here in North Charleston. Headquarters is probably reserved for their Seattle buildings and whatnot. But in any event, uh, you probably are all well aware of the many, many issues Boeing has had over the last handful of years. Specifically, there was a couple crashes that they were found to be at fault for in some manner, or at least that was the assertion. And they were brought to court over this. There was a deal that was reached. Now there's a new deal. So the Justice Department has announced that they've reached a deal with Boeing. It's not a done deal. It still has to be approved by a judge, but it very well could end up being, approved. This deal happened on Friday, and it would spare the company from taking criminal responsibility for that pair of deadly 737 MAX crashes that happened in 2018 and 2019. Under the deal, which, by the way, is very much opposed by many of the families of the victims of those crashes. Boeing would admit to obstructing federal oversight. They would pay a fine, contribute to a fund for the families, and invest in safety and quality programs. So that stuff all sounds well and good, but yes, the families are opposed to this current deal. So it's just the latest update in this. It's years that this legal drama basically has been going on over these crashes, that again date back to the final days of the first Trump administration. That's how long ago we're talking that these things happen, and these families have been dealing with it for that long. And this new deal reverses a different deal that was reached last summer that I talked about on this show, in which Boeing had agreed with the Justice Department. Of course, at that time it was under President Biden. They agreed to plead guilty to a felony charge of conspiring to defraud the Federal Aviation Administration. That's the big thing that the families seem most opposed to. Although, the whole, they admit to doing certain things, they're paying a fine, they're going to, contribute to a fund for the families and, invest in safety and quality programs and on and on. That's all well and good. And the families are on board with that. But they wanted to see the company be held criminally responsible. And even though they would admit that they obstructed federal oversight in this new deal, there is no criminality associated with it. So the judge that oversaw the case originally had asked the parties to revise the deal in December of last year, criticizing the process the agreement had laid out for the selection of an independent monitor who would make sure that Boeing was abiding by the deal. Boeing's admission in this new agreement that they obstructed the FAA would not constitute a guilty plea, which is why, as I mentioned, it's not considered any kind of admission of committing a crime. So under Biden, that Justice Department, there was a deal in place, but the judge, for some reason, didn't like the selection of an independent monitor. And that was really the only hangup. And now this new deal addresses way more than that and takes away that guilty plea, which is ridiculous. Uh, I'm not going to get into it here, but go look up the details of the case. What caused the accidents, how they got there, and you tell me you don't think they should be, in addition to paying fines and all the other stuff, which is all well and good, that they shouldn't be held criminally responsible for what occurred in these crashes. So the Justice Department floated the possibility of this kind of deal in a call with families of victims of the crashes last week, and their lawyers dismissed it as a miscarriage of justice, which it certainly sounds like to me. Boeing declined to comment on this New York Times story in regards to the new agreement. No surprise there. The agreement still needs to be approved by the judge overseeing the case, as I mentioned, so it is a chance that this doesn't end up happening. So as far as the details of what they'd have to pay, Boeing would have to invest about $455 million in quality and safety programs and pay about $445 million into a compensation fund for beneficiaries of the 346 people who died in those crashes. By the way, those crashes, one happened in Indonesia in 2018, and the 2019 crash was in Ethiopia. The company would also be fined $487 million, half of which it already would receive credit for because they've already paid a fine previously. So that even though that's still the total, but they've already paid a fine related to this case, so it would take away about half of what they would still owe. In addition to that, Boeing would also agree to retain what is called a compliance consultant who would issue recommendations to the company and report findings to the government. So that's that whole independent person outside of the company who's going to make sure Boeing is, doing the right things. I mean, it's still in there, but apparently this is more to the judge's liking for whatever reason. In addition to that, the company's board would also be required to meet with the families of the victims. Okay, I mean, yeah, that's the least they should do, obviously. And again, all the fines that they have to pay and having someone, overseeing them that's outside the company, that's great. That should be happening. The funds for the families and investing in quality and safety, that's all great. And that's absolutely what should be happening. But again, them not having to plead guilty or even end up going to court, because this would be like a plea deal to any kind of crime, is just mind blowing to me, because they just seem so clearly negligent in these crashes and everything that occurred leading up to them. And it is disappointing to see this happen. On Friday, Senators Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, both are Democrats, they urged the department not to reach a new deal. They said in this letter that any deal between DOJ and Boeing that would allow the company and its executives to avoid accountability would be a serious mistake. I agree with that. So that's the latest on the Boeing saga. Again, deal's not done, still has to be approved. We'll see what ends up happening. Last story is an update of something we talked about a while ago. It involves the city of Columbia. I know this is a Charleston podcast, but we talk about all the things going on in the state as well, especially big stories. And this was a pretty big one. Columbia, for those who don't know, they are the only city in the state that has banned so-called conversion therapies for LGBTQ plus youth. These are widely discredited as being harmful and they don't work. And there are other places that have banned these dangerous programs, and Columbia did the same. However, Attorney General Alan Wilson has asked the city to repeal the ban, which certainly seems like a current culture war, nonsense, especially as he is trying to run for governor, or at least he appears to be. That hasn't been officially announced. So after hearing from speakers for over an hour and a half, the Columbia City Council decided to defer a vote on whether to repeal its 2021 ban on conversion therapy. So essentially, they're just kicking the can down the road at this moment. So the ban is still in effect. Columbia's elected officials have been facing pressure, as I mentioned, from the Attorney General and the state legislature to repeal the ban. So those who spoke at a public hearing that happened on May 20th, there were 21 people in total. They included licensed therapists, LGBTQ plus individuals, and religious leaders. In addition, some of those speakers included LGBTQ plus people who were subjected to this, so-called conversion therapy when they were minors. And they were telling stories of abuse, the struggles they went through, and also that they attempted suicide once they started these programs. Now, those are obviously anecdotal to this situation, but that is what we have seen on the national scale as far as these conversion therapy programs being discredited. They don't work. Granted, I'm sure there's, whatever percentage of people who are claiming it worked and are living, a life as a straight person when they're not. There's always going to be outliers, but by and large, this has been seen as something that is harmful to youth. So good news, ban is still in effect. Bad news, they just deferred a vote. They may end up changing their minds down the road. We'll see what happens. The big thing I think is it's going to be the pressure. How much are they going to see from the state legislature as well as the attorney general? And, it's only a matter of time before Nancy Mace weighs in on it. She's also running for governor. I mean, that's clear as day, even though she hasn't announced it. So you would have the two front runners, suppose everyone thinks they're going to be the two front runners. Again, speculation, because neither's announced that they're running. I'm sure you're going to hear pressure from them, but maybe by the time the governor's race heats up, there'll be some other cultural issue. There'll be something else that they're distracted by, and it won't come up again. So that's also kind of a good thing about this deferral on the vote. Is that maybe they'll just get tired of this culture war and they'll move on to something else. So we'll see what happens. But for now, the ban on conversion therapy is still in place in Colombia. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Just a quick episode to get you on your way this Monday. Hope you have an amazing week. If you're looking for plans any day this week or beyond, holycitycenter.com/calendar is where you want to go. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show as well. I'll be back with you later this week. Already looking forward to it. Until then, good night and good luck.